Mi v vodstvu in vodje verjamemo, da je ostala zaupanja vredna ekipa, ki ne bo dopuščala odhajanja informacij.
Ampak jaz nisem videl človeka z tršo kožo, kot je Edvard, ali pa z krajšim spominom in on je resen problem.
EKWB, founded in 1999 and the world's largest manufacturer of water cooling components for DIY computers, is on the brink of bankruptcy. And EKWB, if you don't know, is a massive company in the space. The company has done about $257,263,000 US in net sales since 2011. It had offices across 3 continents, holds numerous patents on fittings, pumps, radiators, and cooling. And during COVID, it had its biggest 3 years ever, doubling in sales from 2019 to 2021. And yet somehow the company is out of money, and we can't identify any one person who walked away incredibly wealthy. So the mystery remains, where did the money go? EK's bank accounts were briefly restricted last week before it opened an account in Lithuania. The company, run by founder and CEO Edvard Konig, stopped paying employees numerous times over the summer, evidenced by these translated screenshots between management and employees, where the employees express inability to pay for childcare or for their homes.
So I missed the mortgage payment in February. I think it was either January or February, I can't remember exactly. And this was right before my mortgage renewal was coming up. Regardless of if EK lives, dies, makes millions, billions, or just gets tanked completely, I'm actually paying for the mistakes they've made.
In more documents we uncovered, EK this month legally challenged Thermal Grizzly, helmed by respected engineer and YouTuber Der Bauer, for hiring former EK R&D engineer Joe Roby.
I think that the main contributing factor that immediately forced me to, really seriously think about it was when the first payment was delayed in April.
And EK has also threatened employees not to leak to the media. They leaked it to us. If the leaking of information continues, we will simply have to acknowledge that we haven't done enough. And we usually find out who is responsible. I will use all means necessary, and I do not want and will not allow harm to come to EKWB, to me, and to our brand. Contributing to suspicions of insolvency, GN obtained a recording of EK's top executive, the right-hand man of Edvard Konig, Marko Mitrovic, expressing financial distress for the company and seemingly, to us, seeking atypical pathways to get loans.
Insolventnost bi bila lahko, mi v tem trenutku je vprašanje, če smo sposobni dobiti denar, kar pomeni, da bomo morali na zelo visokih nivojih praktično zastavljati faco, obraz pa še kaj drugega, zaradi tega, da bomo dobili na, dajmo tako reči, ne na bilanco pa na to, kar imamo, ampak na lepe oči, pa frizuro, pa kravato.
Currently, the city of San Antonio in Texas and its public school system are suing subsidiary EK Cooling Solutions LLC for not paying taxes for 3 years. We originally thought they'd only missed franchise payments in our first piece, and that EK America's CEO had failed to pay taxes on what appeared to be her own outside marketing agency, but it's actually a lot more than that. And through our 5-month-long investigation, we obtained hundreds of pages of documents detailing EK's financial woes. This is a list of unpaid suppliers. This photo from inside the office shows EK's warning to employees about Government Labor Bureau inspections triggered by non-payment. EKWB has been run into the ground by its executive and leadership team. In this story, we explore all of this and more, and the clock is ticking for EKWB. We brought you this video with store.gamersnexus.net. Across our 3-part EK series, we have about $80,000 in cost and halted all publication to investigate this in depth. On this video, more than any other, we need to see your support. To support our efforts, we just restocked our original 3D Drink Coaster 4-pack. Each pack includes 4 unique coasters featuring computer hardware such as fans with swooping blade gradients that are carefully balanced, a motherboard coaster with CPU socket and pins, a GPU coaster with more VRAM than you'll find on modern 60 class cards, and a GN logo with voltage regulators. They also pair excellently with our copper-plated stainless steel mule mugs that we just restocked, featuring a formula for the thermal conductivity of copper. Finally, our highly heat-resistant silicone soldering mats now come in more colors. If you find this reporting valuable, please consider placing an order on our store to help support this, because this is extremely expensive and disruptive to our day-to-day process, but we love doing it. And your purchases mean we can do more of it. Thank you for your support. To begin to understand where we are today, we need the context of yesterday. EKWB is a company that has enjoyed complete domination of the water cooling industry for years now, selling CPU and GPU blocks, cooling radiators, fittings, and coolant for computer cooling systems. Helpfully, EK's intranet is publicly accessible on the internet. It states that EK has shipped over 3,500 models of computer hardware products in its history, averaging one every 26 hours in 2021. But EK wasn't always that big. EK is a Slovenian company named for founder Edvard Konig. It began when Konig built his first computer in 1999 and wanted better cooling solutions for the system. This is arguably the start of EKWB. In 2003, Konig machined his first prototypes and registered on enthusiast forum slowtech.com. Some forum users have posted comments about the modest beginnings when they met Konig in parking lots or at his apartment to buy blocks and aquarium pumps. Somewhere around 2003 to 2004, Edvard Konig met Matjaz, a self-proclaimed business guru and angel investor. Kirch today owns 15% of the EKWB parent company, a share he bought in 2019 for 2.055 million euros. Confusingly, this was done by taking a loan from Edvard Konig to then buy shares of EK from Konig through Ideas, but we covered this strange loop in part 2. This 2020 interview with Kirch describes their meeting.
I was doing workshops, making business plans for startups, and Eddie was on one of that workshops. When Eddie came, it was a great technical idea, and we had to work a lot on the business part of it. And at the end of the workshop, Eddie came to me and he said, well, you know, I would like to work with you. What do we do? And that was it.
This would become a critical first turning point and milestone for EK. Despite the many flaws Kirch presented in more recent years running the now much larger company, by all accounts, he did get Konig into distribution in Europe and contribute largely to the original growth.
One of us is more long-term oriented, one is more short-term oriented, one is more detail-oriented, one is more like broader picture-oriented. So, and when you combine and discuss, then you can really make better decisions.
These were the early days. With the help of Matjaz Kirch and Vera Nunic, the trio formed the first EK sole proprietorship and did so at their first office. Now, shortly after all of this, the first public tax filings appear, and we were able to source them. Edvard Konig and Matjaz Kirch grew the company to 12 people over the next 7 to 8 years, and grew the company's cash reserves to 131,000 euros. In 2011, now in business 8 years since the official formation of the first company, EK managed to bring in 2.3 million euros in revenue, although reported profit for the period just over 40,000 euros. Now, this is the second major turning point for the company. To try and deal with this growth, the pair decided that it was time to hire a professional outside executive. Mark Tanko was hired from an internet ad for a CEO at then-growing EKWB. He was the first true outsider to the company, and under his leadership, EK experienced explosive growth. From 2013 until Tanko's departure in 2017, Tanko grew EK to 44 employees, plus around another 40 external contractors contributing to marketing, video, photography, and other work, bringing it from 12 to around 80 people at the end of his tenure. He also contributed to the company's largest boost in cash on hand in its history until its later COVID surge, growing from 368,000 euros in 2016 to 1.1 million euros in 2017, and then 1.6 just after his departure in 2018. We spoke to former EK CEO Mark Tanko about his time at the company and got some on-record conversations. Tanko wrote this to us. Quote, Matjaz played a key role in transforming Konig's technical concept into a functional business, handling the business aspects while Konig focused on product development. Eddie had very poor management skills, at least at the time. Their initial successes included securing their first distribution deals in Germany, I think Case-Kane, and England, overclockers, which prompted an expansion of operations. When I joined the company in 2013, Eddie and Matjaz were still managing the company together, and Nico, who had been with the company for a few years, was leading the engineering team due to his deep understanding of custom cooling solutions and customer needs. Eddie and Matjaz wanted a professional manager to handle the business operations. Since everything was going great for a while under the leadership of me and Nico, Eddie decided to focus on his family, had 2 kids born, and Matjaz went spending his money in new fun projects elsewhere. That lasted for a few years. I think there were a lot of positive things happening in those early days. The company was growing, we had a blast. The roles were set, and we were happy in the new offices, looking for new projects to do, like the first AIO, or collabs with big companies like Nvidia or AMD. I really enjoyed my 5 years with the company. Despite the kind words by Mark Tanko here, the departure was not mutually expected. Former employees under Tanko informed GN that the then CEO was forced out in 2017 over disputes regarding investments. 2 camps formed. Eddie and Matjaz, longtime friends on one side, and Mark Tanko, the outsider CEO, on the other. And at this time, Eddie was 100% owner and had final say. We're told that Eddie and Matjaz came back to be actively involved in the company and brought with them expensive ideas with, allegedly, very little planning for execution properly. And Tanko's former staff told us that when Tanko pushed back due to financial infeasibility of some of the ideas, he was eventually asked to leave. This triggered the resignation and the next turning point. Tanko was forced out. Nico Tividar, the CTO and head of engineering, and Andrzej Skraba, the head of marketing, both resigned in protest. Nico and Tanko eventually went to form Corsair's Hydro X line, with Skraba exiting the hardware industry. This was a full wipe of the executive management and leadership at that time, leaving only Konig and Kirch, who hadn't run the company since it had just 12 employees and 1/10 of the cash on hand to run the company. It was a much different beast now than when they last left off with executive decision-making for EK water blocks. In 2017, Konig immediately took back over and appointed Matjaz Kirch as the vice CEO. To replace the head of engineering who departed, Edvard Konig found Joe Roby, who eventually was promoted up the ranks.
I'm Joe Roby, and I was formerly the lead product designer at EK Water Blocks. I joined in May of 2018. At that time, I joined as like modder and very experienced R&D engineer, and after about a year, I think it was, then I got the lead product designer position. So.
And when Roby joined, times were still good for EK.
So when I joined, it still wasn't very big, and it was a very agile company. The way they did business was pretty smart. It allowed them to scale to huge production runs, and you know, the numbers of blocks they were producing. I remember for the 20 series and 30 series, it was crazy. You know, it was like a week before the card came, the design would be confirmed, and there would be like 10,000 units ready to ship for a launch day. It was mad.
We asked Joe Roby what EK's biggest advantage was over its competition, especially at that time.
When I joined, that was when they pretty much had just covered every product category. So, you know, water cooling went from each individual company having their own specialization to, you know, there were multiple big players who offered every single product to build the whole loop, and EK was the first to have everything.
But these strengths couldn't outweigh the decision-making of the executives, who immediately set forth betting the company on multiple new and expensive ventures. Konig, needing cash, sold 15% of the company to friend and co-CEO Matjaz in 2019. As a part of this deal, Kirch was assigned the role of CEO of EKWB, and that was in March of 2019, marking the next critical milestone for the company's trajectory. And EK didn't yet know that this one would mark the start of the downward trajectory. With the new CEO secured so that Konig could focus on products, Kirch then set forth on an aggressive business plan. He first split the company into multiple business units such as enterprise and DIY, and this would allow internal competition between the arms of the business and should allow management to have more visibility into projects which are costing too much money to cut the dead weight. Now, one former consultant of EK, who is currently owed over 40,000 euros, as claimed to us, thought this was a good move at the time and that it would allow fast cuts and removal of excessive cost. However, former EK head of R&D Joe Roby didn't agree with this decision.
The turning point was, for me, I mean, it wasn't noticed at that time, but I could see where it could go, and that was when things were divided by business unit. It instantly started to like create internal competitions between them, like where you know, one might feel like they obtained a resource and they were entitled to use it first, and it stopped acting like one big entity. It made it a bit less agile, and of course, like suddenly justified for some roles 4 times more staff. And things became big, and the headcount grew really fast through 2020 and 2021 specifically. And I think that was a turning point. It wasn't necessarily bad, but it needed such careful management and like delicate handling of all the relations that no one was sort of ready or equipped for, coming from a mentality of less than 100 people.
But that wasn't the only sweeping change under Edvard Konig and Matjaz Kirch's newly reformed leadership. In 2019, the first year after one full term of operation without the former executive team, the company's cash on hand halved. Its profit declined. The company's total liabilities skyrocketed. And this doesn't necessarily show us the whole picture, just what EK has self-reported and categorized. The pair also aggressively expanded into new markets. In the US, they assigned the CEO role to their longtime mutual friend, Kat Silberstein. They expanded into Bosnia and Herzegovina under longtime friend Vera Nunic. They added small offices in Japan and China, expanded into Serbia under Marko Mitrovic, introduced to Matjaz Kirch by a high-paid EK consultant who is also the director of an important entity that we'll encounter later in the story. And Mitrovic had valuable connections for EK, especially with lenders, both private and institutional, across multiple countries. At no point in this expansion, however, did EK purchase its own manufacturing equipment. Joe Roby told us that it didn't own a single CNC. This is unlike other water cooling companies in the business, and while this has some upsides for ramping scale rapidly, it also has downsides in cost control over production runs and owning your own assets, which is always valuable for a business. So it's a rarity among water cooling companies. Today, EK Waterblocks has numerous employees, contractors, and suppliers who have been unpaid for varying periods of time. It owes tens of millions of dollars, as we understand it, and is taking on new credit at higher interest rates to pay older debts at lower interest rates, which puts it in a precarious position. It still is taking orders that, with the amount of lawsuits it now faces, we are not convinced will entirely ship, depending on how late into this cycle it continues taking those orders and at what point, if it happens, the switch flips. And all of that is the hyper-condensed history up until the critical time window of 2019 to 2024. And that sets the stage for our title. This story gets very confusing to follow if not organized a certain way. I actually spent weeks trying to figure out how to put it all into a video anyone could make any sense out of. So while conducting this investigation, we'd originally planned to present the information by topic. And what we found was that it just simply was too difficult to understand with all the different names, places, and entities involved in the story. What we realized was that many of the tips, leaks, and other evidence in the story and our sources were all pointing to basically 4 key people: the executives and the leaders over the last 5 or so years. Ultimately, this is a story about the downfall of EK and what we believe to be is its destruction based on its plummeting profits and reputation, along with the mountains of evidence and reports we've received of continued failure to pay owed wages and taxes, many of these proven with substantial evidence. And so there's just no way we can tell this story without discussing the top-ranking owners, CEOs, and officers who had a responsibility ethically, financially, and oftentimes legally to operate the company in such a way that it is safe and responsibly run and is able to pay its debts. We believe they failed to do so. Based on the evidence, the 4 people we're discussing are the ones we think contributed to the downfall of this company. Here are the names you need to know: Edvard Konig, Matjaz, Marko Mitrovic, Kat Silberstein, Iztok Malicic. Actually, you know what, this is getting just too confusing. So you know what, let's just assign nicknames, kind of like a bank heist. Except with a bank heist, obviously you'd be stealing money. Well, okay, but you would probably be breaking the law. You know what, let's just move on. Although there's a web of dozens of people and companies that we've tracked back to their roots, ultimately it's the leaders who drive all the decisions in an organization. There are 4 leaders in recent history. Marko Mitrovic is the demolitions expert with an explosive temper, who we've heard in recordings berating and belittling employees and even his co-executives. Mitrovic is connected to massive, repeated expenses, largely related to the EK Serbia branch that he runs. But he's also silently involved in EK HQ in Slovenia. He is the powder keg. Matjaz is the egotistical getaway driver and scapegoat. He was appointed as CEO by longtime friend and founder Edvard Konig, investing in products built on spite, like the EK Sim Racer. When Konig ousted Matjaz earlier this year, he took to the camera to insinuate that Kirch is the reason for EK's failures. Matjaz is the fall man. Kat Silberstein is the smooth talker who goes to every event imaginable with industry influencers, executives, and financial controllers. She helmed EK's US branch and calls herself CEO of EK Americas, spending company money on endless networking endeavors. She is the charmer. And Edvard Konig is the desperate inside man. He founded the company, starting from selling handmade blocks for cash in parking lots decades ago. He's an engineer at heart who ended up over his head, making a series of bad decisions and appointments, and more recently, aggressive legal action. His own leadership has described him as easily manipulated, with the last person who spoke to him having the most influence. He is the puppet. Look, obviously this analogy is a bit silly, and we don't want to seem like we're diminishing the severity of the roles these people played, but I just spent the last 5 months trying to wrap my head around all the different people and elements of the story, and it's been very difficult. We needed a device to try and make it easier and define the roles we think each of these people played. As they say in Slovenia, riba smrdi pri glavi, or the fish rots from the head. We'll start there. Founder and CEO Edvard Konig can be found on Slovenia's top 100 wealthiest people lists. However, this past year has been a whirlwind for him. We'll break this section into 3 topics: unpaid staff and suppliers, a lone Deathloop, and threats. Under Edvard Konig's ownership, EKWB has a history of pay disputes by contractors. In 2019, Konig was summoned to court by a judge in a former contractor's case, but he chose to send a representative instead. Unhappy with this, the judge awarded contractors socio-custodic damages and unpaid wages in 2021 for 2019. So the behavior is not new, but 2023 started to show some major cracks.
I guess the signs were first the difficulty with suppliers, and samples just not coming, like parts not coming because suppliers hadn't been paid. So that was the first awareness to the situation that I would have, and that was probably during 2023 already.
In early 2024, the situation worsened when EK failed to pay external contractors. Again, Most we spoke with couldn't be named due to ongoing legal proceedings against EKWB. But among people who were willing to go on record was Dave Alcock, the former EK public relations representative of all the people to not pay for EK.
I'm Dave Alcock. It's EK, I was doing marketing and PR, so dealing with press, media, and modders. The reason I left is quite simply I hadn't been paid for coming on 2 months, and I was struggling. Previous to the payment that I hadn't been paid for 2 months for that as well. So I'd gone like 2 months, then got payment, then another 2 months of no pay, and then I got a promised date, didn't get paid on that date. And it was just tough. So it was just money. I live like most people, paycheck to paycheck still, and yeah, I couldn't not be paid for months in a row. And there was no. Every time I asked for some kind of sort of definitive answer on when are we going to get paid, because even that, just being open and telling us what date we'd be paid on as an actual date would have helped me a lot. But there was just, we don't know when money's coming in, we don't know where it's coming from, blah blah blah, and it was just tough.
What were you under any like sort of personal financial pressure as a result of that?
Oh yeah, I'm under financial pressure still, even though I've got a job, full-time job, and I'm getting paid, which compared to EK's, that's a novelty in itself. Getting paid is quite nice, but even now, so I missed the mortgage payment in February. I think it was either January or February. I can't remember exactly. And this was right before my mortgage renewal was coming up, and because of that, my credit rating tanked. So I lost, I think it was 60 points or 80 points. And before I was on a perfect credit score. So I was on like the highest you could be on every single site to check your credit rating. That tanked quite significantly. And because of that, we went to get our mortgage renewal. And they said, the initial rate we offered you is no longer available to you. So the new rate's going to be this. And we'll have to lock you in for 3 or 5 years to keep that rate.
Right.
It's about £100 more than the original one. So £100 times 12 times 5 is what it's cost me initially because of
so they actually paid. Caused some. I mean that would be that's not just the sort of damage of missing the payments, but it has a knock-on effect as well. Yeah. And obviously now I've not had a payment missed since, because I wouldn't have missed that payment had I known that the money wasn't coming, because I could have moved stuff around, but it goes back to them not telling me when we are going to be paid. And if I moved stuff around, I'd incur charges from other places, but I wouldn't have been incurred such a charge. I'd have moved some credit card money across, so I'd have had to pay more percentage back initially. Right. But I could have done it. At the very time Dave describes not getting paid by EK, he was still contracted to do public relations work, and this included replying to people on Reddit defending EK, as not doing so could risk his job.
The hardest part, as you mentioned, I was one of the people that weren't getting paid, right. And I was the one that was getting all the hate, because I was the public figure on like Discord, on the water cooling channels, as a public figure on like the EK Reddit post, and everyone's telling me to pay the employees and stuff. I'm like, dude, I'm the one that's not paid here. Like, chill. I'm the one that's missing my mortgage payments.
But you were still working. I mean, you were still performing work.
Oh, yeah.
By May, EK would spiral past just suppliers and contractors and would start showing trouble paying its employees at the Slovenia headquarters. The first company-wide impact to employee payments in Slovenia was on May 15th, which is payday for EK, or it was. Rather than send money, EK sent a last possible minute email to employees on payday, notifying them that they'd need an extra 3 days to make payments. EK then missed this date, but we needed another source. Joe Roby confirmed on record that EK was late for the month of April, due in May.
I think that the main contributing factor that immediately forced me to, really seriously think about it was when the first payment was delayed in April. I just collectively, with Sasha's payment also being delayed, right? For context, like my wife also works at EK. And when your entire household income is just like, this might not come ever, or maybe it will come next week, or maybe it's just a day late, and suddenly your entire income becomes uncertain. It's a huge problem.
Next, this letter was sent on June 27th from Vera Nunic, EKHQ HR head. It informed employees that the Slovenian summer bonus regress payment would be postponed. It promises the obligatory summer bonus instead in October. This is where it started to rapidly unravel. An employee responded in company chat with this massive message expressing frustration with last-minute communication and unmet promises. EK then emailed employees in response, stating that they'd prepare a payment plan. On July 3rd, approximately 40 EK employees were terminated or quit. This included people from RMA, R&D, marketing, assembly, basically every aspect of the company, even product managers. So it's an interesting payment plan. We'll see how it works. But EK told its staff that anyone who didn't believe in the company should leave.
Of course, they can say that this was like a voluntary restructuring on their part, but it's not. So many of those employees left of their own accord. And during some meetings, they'd even invited that, right? There were meetings where they said, if you're not believing in what's in front of you today, please, hand in your notice, or we'll put you on the list for the next wave of redundancy. And when they did that, so many people went forward that they pretty much had to stop them.
On July 15th, Konig sent this message to the company. It states, quote, "The situation is still conducive to the fact that there will be no payment of salaries today. Many of us are not in the office, but we are with you." 2 days later, Konig sent this, quote, "Unfortunately, there will be no salaries today and tomorrow." EK was now at risk of breaking Slovenian labor laws for multiple missed payments in rapid succession. The result was a labor inspectorate investigation, which EK notified employees about on the monitors in the office. Following this exchange, some workers pleaded with Konig as they were unable to pay for school supplies for their children. Others sent us proof of their credit scores tanking from missed payments. Although some employees, like Joe Roby and his wife, could go on record to confirm with us that they were still owed tens of thousands of dollars, most of the employees could not. And that's because, as we understand it, there's approximately 40 former EK employees who are beginning legal action against EK water blocks, not counting contractor and supplier lawsuits that may also be active. Surely then, these must be some pretty expensive employees, if not paying them helps that much. EK's average annual salary is about 28 to 30,000 euros per year, which we know from reading 13 years of EKWB tax filings. This is low, but consistent with the Slovenian average. However, EKWB executive Marko Mitrovic billed EK for 30,000 euros per month at the start of all of this. In 1 month, that's the same amount the average EK employee makes an entire year, and they weren't being paid. In an all-hands meeting obtained by GN, CEO Edvard Konig was questioned by employees about who the real boss is, him or Marko Mitrovic. And the employees also demanded to know why executives like Mitrovic were receiving such high compensation while they were going unpaid. Konig answered, saying that crisis managers need to be paid well.
V glavnem, to je moj komentar. Ljudi, ki delajo in rešuje podjetje z mano, je treba dobro plačati. Primerno plačati.
Suppliers weren't in better shape. This document leaked to us shows EK had 3.4 million euros in total recent agreements with companies like DHL, law firms, and its manufacturing partners. The document tallies 1.6 million euros still unpaid at the time of the document, including some that are late approaching 1 year. Some of these have since been paid by new loans. And that brings us to the loan Deathloop. In June, we were informed that EK owed around 30 million euros in its various debts. We've been able to corroborate about 28 million euros of these through digging, through mostly tax documents. The leak we received indicated about 3.2 to 5 million euros estimated owed to suppliers, contractors, and employees, plus another 25 to 27 million owed to various financial institutions, private lenders, and friendly IOUs. And our understanding is that this has snowballed. For example, these documents detail about 1 million euros in loans that were due in July of this year, meaning EK had to come up with 1 million euros to pay them down, or risk having inventory seized as it was collateral. The loans were also at a high interest rate of 10%. Curiously, one of these documents shows a €440,000 loan that was due in July, not counting interest. We noticed that just last week, the Land Registry of Slovenia recorded a transaction where Konig sold an investment property, his old condo, or maybe simply transferred it. In either case, a mortgage appeared, conveniently for exactly €440,000. The buyer? EK Serbia CEO Marko Mitrovic, and with it acquired to the condo address, he registered a new entity, EK International, not owned by parent company EKWB or Edvard Konig. But that's not Konig's only property. In 2022, EK Waterblocks gave a loan of €874,000 to an owner of the company, non-specific about whether that was Kirch or Konig. A source in EK's finance department asserts that, coincidentally, Edvard Konig had allegedly previously taken an €800,000 loan from the company to help purchase and build his new property. The timelines add up and suggest that these might be the same event. Around that time, Konig also took a €500,000 30-year mortgage from a bank in March of 2023 for the property. Konig and EKWB, which he owned at least 3 properties recently. EKWB's main office, an investment apartment of Konig's, now sold to Mitrovic, and his personal home that he recently built. In May, Konig took new loans against his personal home and the main office building of EK for €3.2 million, split between 2 lenders, Vectra Real Estate and Alfie PD. This loan is at a brutal 9.75% and must be repaid in just 1 year. With the fresh $3.2 million or so now secured, EK went on to start paying some of its debts. We're told that 2 of its top priorities were suppliers, Napis and Kimi, for fitting and coolant orders, as these are apparently high-margin products. Now, we're not sure who else they paid, but what we do know is that employees still haven't been paid, and some of them are owed upwards of 3 months of pay now. We'll come back to EK's solvency at the end. We have a lot of documents on that as well, like this table of costs from May. And that brings us to Edvard Konig's next section. Threats. We're going back to 2011 to start this one. In 2011, EK posted a statement about its blocks flaking. The flaking was due to a plating issue, as discovered by an independent lab that was crowdsourced by users of an old forum. Long story short, EK's nickel plating problem caused high RMA rates and returns for some retailers. One such retailer was a smaller mom and pop shop that was not only stuck with expensive, defective inventory, but was also taking a reputational hit from customers who purchased products that EK had refused to adequately address. With no other options and stuck with defective products, they took it on themselves to address the problem as best they could. This retailer chrome-plated water blocks and added a small upcharge to cover the costs. The chrome-plated blocks did not flake or leak, according to the retailer, resolving EK's issues with flaking without needing EK's cooperation. Following this, Edvard Konig personally sent this email to the retailer. Quote, "Your company was or is selling unauthorized EK products," and then linked the chrome-plated blocks. "With this serious breach of trust that has happened, we thought to stop dealing with you totally, but we slept over it. So our proposal is a non-negotiable compensation of $10,000 is expected before we go further." The retailer told us that they immediately began liquidating all EK supply and began the proceedings of cutting off contact with the company. Now, this email reads like, in my opinion, an extortion attempt, but that was 12 years ago. People change, companies change, and so instead we could look to more modern examples. As most of you know, EK previously sent 2 cease and desist letters from 2 EK entities to contractor Dan Henderson, who kicked all this off. To make these go away, Henderson could voluntarily pay €70,000 per letter, totaling €140,000. And if he doesn't pay, go to prison for a year. Following this, and leading into the industry's largest trade show, Computex, we received this leaked email that we've retyped to protect sources just in case EK planted any flags or identifiable information in it. This email stated that workers are to follow the direction of one of the newer EK Bosnia hires, and that failure to do so would result in immediate termination. Anyone speaking with media about anything except products would result in immediate termination. It stated that, quote, questions about allegations in the yellow media would be met with a scripted response. Now, yellow media here is a phrase that EK is using to refer to yellow journalism. They're using it in a derogatory way to refer to our previous reporting by calling it sensationalist.
I received a very firmly worded letter to say that I would follow the delegation of managers on site, which consisted of 2 people with a very short tenure in the company and no standing in the industry whatsoever. The day before I'm boarding the flight, and I get that email, it's practically a threat, right? Like failure to comply with the instruction there would be termination of employment contract, and it's not like someone that had been appointed as senior to me personally. They're not my managers. They're not any kind of like hierarchy between me and them. So that was just, I don't know.
Was that
that really made me feel like they don't care about us.
Right.
I had no way of opting in or out of that. It was just an immediate like, oh, here we go, we've served you a threat.
Although we did sneak a photographer over to EK's booth during Computex just to spot Konig there, this is one of the many reasons that we decided not to go to EK's booth despite our original plans. Now, there are other reasons too, but the main one was we didn't want to risk getting anyone lower rank fired for simply talking to us or becoming instantly implicated if we later say something in a video like this. And so we stayed away as we take that responsibility very seriously and didn't want to put anyone at unnecessary risk. Now, that email was a while ago. We received it from multiple people at EK and connected to EK. And finally, around July 23rd, Konig threatened his own employees for going to us with the story in general. We already played that meeting recording in the beginning. You can see the text on screen. Although we have plenty more on Edvard Konig, it's time that we move to the next subject of the 4, Marko Mitrovic. We move our story on now with a name that hasn't come up much yet, but is important to the story, Marko Mitrovic. Mitrovic is the one we described as a bit of a powder keg, in that in some of the recordings we've heard, he's been aggressive towards some of the employees questioning him.
Moje vprašanje je Nejcu, kakšen je njegov namen, pa kakšne ambicije ima on. Nejc, se tebi ne zdi, da malo prekoračuješ funkcijo svojo, pa svoje stvari? Ne vem, jaz se dobro razumem, da si ti sindikalni zastopnik, ali se greš politikanstvo v firmi EKWB? Ampak jaz nisem videl človeka z tršo kožo, kot je Edi, ali pa z krajšim spominom. In on je resen problem. Zdaj smo prišli do resnih problemov in vzrokov teh problemov.
Officially and on paper, Mitrovic is the director of the EK Serbia branch, but was also described to GN by EK employees in Slovenia as the co-CEO, they called him, of EK HQ. Although this isn't an official title and is not one that EK shares publicly. However, this official EK internal org chart lists Marko Mitrovic as the top rank alongside Edvard Konig. Kat Silberstein, EK USA's CEO, was also present on this version of the document. This was an internal employee document, but here's what's curious. On August 19th, a Slovenian news agency published this story about EK being on the brink of bankruptcy. Suspiciously, immediately following that post about EK's bank accounts being restricted, an insider sent us this new version of EK's org chart, which was edited. And it seems that EK changed it in an interesting way. Mitrovic and Silberstein had been removed completely from this version of the org chart, and yet both remain at the companies. This chart was published internally after the story. Mitrovic's name has been scrubbed, but he wasn't fired, nor did he resign, that we're aware of. Mitrovic is still at EK, acting as both the director of EK Serbia and still being a driving force of EKWB in Slovenia. GN obtained invoices that appear to be from Mitrovic to EKWB in Slovenia, where he billed the company around 450,000 euros with tax since 2021, over 300,000 euros of which was from 2023 through March of 2024 alone. These invoices used to be accessible to most of the company. That's how we got them. They show Mitrovic billing sometimes in excess of 25,000 euros at the same time as contractors were experiencing payment difficulties. Now, without access to his bank account, we can't know if he got that money for certain. But what we do know is that in the call recording from July 23rd, EK employees were asking why certain high-ranking individuals, like the crisis managers, were being paid so much while they weren't being paid at all. Here's where this is going. We think it looks like Marko Mitrovic is draining large amounts of money from EK in the form of invoices for outside consulting services, including his own invoices for services and services provided by people we believe to be his friends, friends of friends, and close personal relationship. This is our best understanding of a very complicated web of relationships that is difficult or impossible to 100% nail down, but we're going to do our best, try to keep up. Around the same time Mitrovic's own invoice history stops, these similarly priced bills for Masha Kirstein Consulting appear. Who is Masha Kirstein? Marko Mitrovic's alleged significant other, who's billed EK for 111,902 euros in 17 months. This 335,000 euro charge is for Exacta Advisory in Serbia. Exacta is helmed by two individuals stated to be Mitrovic's personal friends. This is Serbian esports boot camp ENAT, which courted EK for sponsorship. ENAT is 65% owned by Exacta. This is Rome Business School in Belgrade, where EK sent employees to get MBAs. At least one of the Exacta Advisory owners works there, and Exacta Advisory hosts competitions there. How do we know about the connection between EK and Rome Business School? Well, EK and Rome Business School published a video where the head of HR for EK, who just recently told employees that they won't be paid on time, is seen in this video advertising the school, saying that there's no limit for EK's expenses when it comes to employees, except for their wages. EK Slovenian HQ moved more than €1 million in capital into EK Serbia to prep for its business venture, which is held by Marko Mitrovic. EK Serbia launched a failed web development project that cost the company at least €750,000 and was never fully finished, and it was only supposed to sell water-cooled parts. These invoices are for €144,000 from BPMC, helmed by Boris Potocnik, who's also the director of Exacta Slovenia branch, subsidiary of Exacta Serbia, who allegedly introduced then CEO Matjaz to Marko Mitrovic. From what we've heard, when EK's good outsider CFO abandoned the job due to insurmountable stress, Mitrovic hired Istok Malicic as a replacement, and these two are personal friends. How do we know that? They teach karate together with this guy, another consultant. Look, all these expenses to companies and schools and people and consultants and agencies and whatever, we have no comment on whether they're legitimate or not. We're not disputing the legitimacy of the services they may or may not provide. And frankly, with EK's history of not paying contractors, it's possible that some of them have also not gotten paid. But what we are trying to do is draw attention to the fact that EK, which can't afford its own employees right now, was in part under the leadership of Mitrovic, who enabled payment of large amounts of money to different organizations and contractors who happen to be tied to him in some way, while employees are not getting paid. That's the point here. They were spending money like no tomorrow. And a lot of it was on these outside services that 10 grand here and there might not seem too bad for a company doing the money they did, but each of those small amounts adds up. Our last two executives are Kat Silberstein and Matjaz. Silberstein is the CEO of EK Cooling Solutions LLC in the US, an entity which squandered millions of dollars. And Matjaz is the former CEO of EKWB and current 15% owner of EKWB. These two are close friends and have known each other for about 20 years now, and as CEOs of EK branches, where CEOs enjoy the successes of a company, they also have to bear the responsibility of its failures. Last time, we mentioned that under Silberstein, EK Cooling Solutions was delinquent on taxes in Texas, triggering a forfeiture of its status and some of its legal protections. Back then, we were also able to connect Kat Silberstein's O1 Inc. separate company to yet another tax delinquency listing, owing $1,643 in taxes in Delaware. Silberstein has done marketing consulting work under O1 Inc., and as we understand it, this includes for EKHQ as a 1099. We checked back in on that delinquent listing, and we found that, about 10 days after our last video, O1 Inc. had been submitted for being voided. As for the Texas tax issue for EK's subsidiary, EK's founder Edvard Konig addressed that in a video called Embracing Accountability.
Several issues have already been addressed, including the amended filing of US taxes.
Well, that's an interesting statement to make, considering that 4 days prior to embracing accountability going live, Bexar County in Texas attempted to serve EK Cooling Solutions LLC a lawsuit for unpaid taxes. GN worked with Texas law firm Rapp & Kroc to obtain the papers from the clerk. Addressed to EK Cooling Solutions, the county states, quote, "You have been sued. You may employ an attorney. You are hereby commanded to appear and answer by filing a written answer before the Honorable District Court, 45th Judicial District, Bexar County, Texas, at the courthouse of said county in San Antonio, Texas." The suit states that EK is being sued for, quote, "taxes due, exclusive of interest, penalties, and cost, in the sum of $6,826.08. This was filed in March and updated on April 29th after successful service. Another document in the lawsuit reads, quote, "This suit is brought for the recovery of delinquent ad valorem taxes," and it names Bexar County, the City of San Antonio, and the Northside Independent School District as plaintiffs. The document estimates $4,189.78 owed to the school districts, which alone is about 10% of a teacher's annual salary in the US. EK also owes about $2,000 to the city and $2,800 to the county. Crazier still, these dues are across 3 years of delinquent taxes, starting in 2021. By not paying taxes, EK Cooling Solutions is now not only potentially harming its employees, as we reported on in part 2, but also the literal school system in the county where they were headquartered in the US. Now, depending on if this goes to discovery, it's possible that this amount increases substantially. Silberstein may also have some personal exposure due to that prior tax forfeiture status. But we think all this fits a theme. It looks like at times EK is run like one endless party, where friends in executive and leadership positions are able to prioritize seemingly anything except for employees. Silberstein was constantly traveling, and at times only in the EK Texas office once per month, according to former EKCS W2 employees who went on record with us last time. Her former staff described her as an absentee CEO while telling us of unsafe working conditions and shaved overtime pay. There's an endless photo reel of ritzy outings, private jets, semi-private flights and charters, and parties with influencers and industry associates on a Facebook profile that's been public. While some of these are personal expenses, the projection of luxury at meetings with industry people and influencers supports an image of a brand doing much better than it truly was. Around the same time as some of these expensive-looking outings, first-class flights, and semi-private charters, EK Cooling Solutions fired its entire San Antonio staff, leaving some of them to find out they were fired when they showed up to change the locks. This left only direct assistance to Silberstein and the CEO herself. When Edvard Konig promoted Kat Silberstein to CEO of EK Cooling Solutions, aka EK Americas, he praised Silberstein's leadership and 20 years of experience working with Fortune 500 brands, naming Apple, Dell, Google, Microsoft, Nvidia, AMD, Intel, and more. Now, these irresponsible actions and poor leadership are not congruent with 20 years of purported experience with brands such as these. But that same year, Konig appointed another CEO, Matjaz, to lead the EKWB headquarters branch as he stepped into a role focusing on product. Now, Kirch once reportedly spent up to $100,000 on solar-powered battery banks so that key EK employees could continue to work in the event of an apocalypse, just in case you're still building water-cooled PCs when the zombies attack or an asteroid strikes. In addition to that story, employees also told us how he helmed the Sim Racer project, which we were able to verify. The project reportedly cost the company around $50,000 in total. It sought pre-orders from customers for $20,000 each, and it never shipped. This project was reportedly initiated because an EK worker quit and went to work for a sim racing startup that had rejected Kirch's desires to be an investor. An employee told us this, quote, "In keeping with the stupid, spiteful way it started, he continued that ethos through the whole project and intentionally excluded marketing, R&D, and the product managers to prove what he could do without them. And in the end, it turned out he couldn't do much at all," end quote. Absolutely brutal quote, by the way. I need that particular employee to write all of my future insults. Now, the straw that broke Konig's back and led to Matjaz Kirch's firing was apparently a $120,000 ad contract with Jay's 2 cents, where we're told that Kirch and Silberstein went behind Konig's back to source the ad deal because they both wanted it. And Jay has been open about this one.
Steve talked about a brand that's been like 5 months late on a brand that's like 5 figures. Our initial contract was 6 figures.
We don't have a problem with Jay selling an ad. We also sell ads. And actually, as soon as we posted our first content, Jay went way beyond what was necessary in a great way. And he very clearly and publicly stated that he did not want to be paid the remainder of the contract until EK had first taken care of its employees and its staff.
First and foremost, if there is a priority that needs to be had here, the employees need to be paid now. Our invoices and stuff are important, but I'm not demanding right now that we be paid before anyone else. Fortunately, I do not operate my company in a way that if a brand like this doesn't follow through, that it financially causes us problems. No, not in the least. So I can tell you right now that if paying us means an employee doesn't get paid, pay the employee, okay? You're still gonna owe us. That's not going anywhere. Employees need to be paid first.
But EK ignored him. In April, EK paid Jay. Actually, that month sounds familiar.
When the first payment was delayed in April.
Around the same time, EK paid another media ad contract, another indicator that its priorities don't seem to be its employees. Konig even addressed the ad contracts in their all-hands meeting in July, throwing Kirch under the bus. At this point, actually, Kirch has been under the bus so many times in the last 5 months, you could probably read the tread for the brand of tire.
In February 2024, I resumed the CEO position.
But the real cost associated to Matjaz Kirch and Kat Silberstein and EK Cooling Solutions was a botched Micro Center deal. We're told Micro Center wanted cheaper water cooling for its in-house PC builds. Matjaz reportedly spent millions of dollars of loaned money, including some of the $5 million from EKHQ, in order to buy inventory for this deal with Micro Center. In a move described to GN as, quote, pure ego by former EK employees, they reported that Kirch overstepped and tried to take the PC building process from Micro Center itself and do it in-house with EK, but this isn't what Micro Center wanted. Apparently, Micro Center just wanted the parts, as it already has a PC building division. Reportedly, when Micro Center's product manager learned of this intent to subvert the in-house PC building to EKCS, the retailer pulled the plug on the whole deal, leaving EK stranded with millions in inventory it had prematurely purchased under Kirch's leadership. Kirch and EK converted these parts into the cooling bare bones line to try and salvage it, with the line ultimately being called a failure by employees due to high RMA rates and low sales. We're told that Kirch next tried to produce EK systems in-house, incurring new costs of becoming a system integrator. The plan was to use Silberstein's crew at EK Cooling Solutions to perform the logistics and assembly of those systems. Ultimately, this venture failed for a number of reasons we described in part 2. It led to the firing of the remaining EK Cooling Solutions staff in Texas and the eventual outsourcing of the building job to Kat Silberstein's former employer SwiftTech, which EK employees have since told us, former employees, has halted assembly as a result of it also being in a status of non-payment by EK. The last section distills it down to something really basic, which is a question. The question is, can EK water blocks be saved? And the answer is an opinion based on facts and evidence in this piece. The short answer is no, not in its current state. The long answer is no! EK simply can't seem to make enough money to survive based on what we have here. In a call recording that we have of a 3-hour meeting, we learned this. EK saw sharp sales drop from over 2.5 million euros per month down to 700 to 800,000 euros per month over the last several months. A few years ago, it was at a high of 5 to 6 million euros in a month, and it has been falling steadily since over a period of years. We know through another document that EK's monthly cost is at minimum 1 million euros per month. That was back in May. An employee told us that this chart doesn't count inventory purchases. It also doesn't include any loans or interest that are newer than the middle of May. EK has started to cut some costs, such as by putting a secondary office space up for rent and abandoning it. We even learned that they're starting to restrict how many parking spaces are available for employees, which is just next level desperation. So EK appears to already be losing money monthly based on what we know. We know that it has secured yet more financing recently, but short of anything like a hard revenue increase, it seems difficult for EK to make money to survive, and especially with all the dues they have. So we've arrived at this point to the conclusion. And this section is going to be based largely on all the evidence and the facts we've collected, but it is ultimately going to be more subjective, a little more opinion in here. We've strived for neutral reporting throughout this content. However, now I'm going to open up the subjective side a little bit. So first, for evidence, we have more, a lot more, like hundreds of documents and over a gigabyte more evidence that's not shared here, and most of that's screenshots and text. So we're gonna cut it here because it's kind of gotten to enough to paint the picture of EK, but there's this interesting snippet of a recording.
Tako slabe volje, zdaj, ker imamo resen problem. Resen problem. Insolventnost bi bila lahko, bomo zdaj morali igrati na karto. In hvala Bogu, da Iztok ni klasičen finančnik in da razume zadeve, pa tako kot se reče v Srbiji na majkini, ene 4 milijone evrov. To je tisto, kar nas dejansko lahko povleče ven, s tem, da nas tudi te 4 milijoni evrov ne morejo povleči ven, zato ker smo zamudili moment.
This will likely be our last major story on EK Water Blocks. We don't have an intent to do another one of these right now. The goal is for this to kind of be the capsule. Here's everything in one go. So if we do any follow-ups, it's gonna be smaller hardware news episodes or small standalone videos, but not heavily produced things that halt all production completely for weeks like this one did. So that's kind of where we stand on that. What matters is that EK has used controversy, this one actually a couple months ago, to self-promote its Computex booth. So it does seem to be a bit of a strategy. One source told us that gaslighting will be their weapon, and we'd agree based on what we've seen. This helps highlight that. Edvard Konig responded to an OC3D post recently stating that the speculations are inaccurate. The OC3D post was talking about things like employees leaving and bank accounts being restricted. This is the playbook. This is what they've been doing. And I'm saddened to see that Konig is not the person I thought he was based on actually meeting him in person. I think in that OC3D reply, he is twisting the facts, just like we think he did with a statement about taxes being resolved, the tax issue in Texas previously. So Konig also implied, weirdly, that Joe Roby or Attila are still working at EK by responding to the post about them. But both told us that they have no current plans to work with EK. Konig further said that EK is going through restructuring, that its staff changes were planned, that there's normal turnover, and that sensationalist reporting is once again ruining everything. Now, I'd love to reply to that statement and really tear into it, but before I do, I think it makes more sense to just let Edvard Konig's former head of R&D and former trusted advisor, Joe Roby, respond to that comment. We'll let him do it uninterrupted.
Firstly, like alluding to that, the staff turnover is normal. Yeah, a staff turnover is normal, right? It's normally 10%, maybe 20% in a very stressful working environment. And this year it must be approaching 60%. For the marketing department specifically, it's even higher. There's practically 90% there. So no, you can't dismiss that as a normal business occurrence. It's simply not. Of course, they can say that this was like a voluntary restructuring on their part, but it's not. You know, so many of those employees left of their own accord, and during some meetings, they'd even invited that. Right, there were meetings where they said if you're not believing in what's in front of you today, please, you know, hand in your notice, or we'll put you on the list for the next wave of redundancy. And when they did that, so many people went forward that they pretty much had to stop them, you know. So it's not a normal state of turnover, and they're not in control of it. And then there was another point mentioned that it seemed to suggest that me and Attila was still collaborating with EK in some capacity.
Oh, and Eddie's post?
Yeah, that's not true. don't know how that's founded. Like, both of us are owed a substantial amount of money. Neither of us have said, yep, we'll just work for free for fun.
And that's not the only thing that EK did to deflect any kind of accountability. They also sent hardware companies we work with a letter. EK sent an email to its partners stating that there is, quote, an upcoming media attack by Gamers Nexus, which could again negatively impact our company's reputation, end quote. This letter was also attached to that email. The letter is signed by EK founder and CEO Edvard Konig himself and is written from him. The letter reads, quote, as you may be aware, the market has been challenging this year, and like many in our industry, we have faced a significant downturn. However, our situation has been exacerbated by recent and ongoing media scrutiny from Gamers Nexus. Earlier this spring, they launched a critical review of our company, and we have now been informed that another video is being prepared, which may further harm our reputation, end quote. Now, EK sent this again to our mutual contacts following our YouTube community post, noting the upcoming video, this one. We originally thought this email might be fake or it could be poisoned information in a discreditation attack, mostly because the header says business secret, exclamation point, which is so comically amateurish that it seems like something a troll would send. However, we received this email from 3 different contacts in the industry at different companies, and we confirmed both EK's use of business secret on documents and the name and rank of the EK employee who sent this email from an EK email address. Strangely, it is real. Edvard Konig continued, quote, it is disheartening to see media outlets such as Gamers Nexus focusing on sensationalist content that not only misrepresents certain facts, but also seems designed to undermine our efforts and damage our relationships with partners like you. While we cannot control the narrative they choose to represent, we want to assure you that we are committed to transparency, integrity, and long-term success of our partnership. The irony of that last sentence, if EK had paid its people properly, as scheduled, or at least as stated, and communicated transparently with its employees and its suppliers, then they could have actually controlled the narrative that they're so worried about. It is literally that simple to control it. There would have been nothing to say, or positive things to say. But instead of fixing the issues that we were investigating, EK is blaming anyone else. Look, we're not here to kick EK when it's down. We're here to report what's going on and the facts of this tragic and sad situation. And as much as that email could be frustrating to read, it really just wasn't for me. I didn't take it that way. Despite its misguided nature, we aren't offended by it, nor are we threatened by it. And honestly, it's just sad. But we have a big story to cover today. Gamers Nexus is not a part of that story, and I'm not here to take the spotlight from the employees I've spent months talking to and the potentially screwed future customers. So the email doesn't deserve a fired up big response. It could easily do 500,000+ views in its own video, but I don't think it's worth it because I'm not going to stand here and fight a sad, broken company that is in the throes of insolvency. But we did want to address it because we also have to work with the companies they emailed, and they need to be aware of our approach to this content and that it is to tell the story. So that is what Konig and EK are worried about right now. They don't seem to be, they're not projecting a concern for their staff who can't pay for supplies for the children to go back to school, or for their suppliers who might be heavily reliant on EK to then pay their employees a salary and create jobs for them. So, we think EK at this point, in its current form, it is not salvageable. In the first video, I said that I thought it might be, and it's because Konig was in charge of it again. But that was before we had this information. I do not think it can be saved right now without changes that would make it not the EK it is today. But that might be for the best. If EK, the brand, is saved, but it's not the same company, that's probably the best outcome here. They need professional leadership. They need probably a change of ownership, or in the very least, a distribution of share to bring in people who would be willing to walk into this dumpster fire. And they might need an acquisition, but I don't know who would want it at this point. So anyway, what we do know is that the behaviors are completely inexcusable. It is impossible to recover while blaming everyone else for its own failures. And until they address that, EK remains a sinking ship. So the executive leadership deflects, it manipulates, it gaslights at every turn, in our opinions. And one finds a way to look innocent and picked on. Another one has products built on ego and spite. Another still fails to take any kind of accountability and blames the media. And then the last one seems to turn people against each other internally. And that is the group of leaders that seem to be at the company by my read of the situation. So it's just the executives, the CEOs, the directors ultimately are responsible for the failures of this company, of any company. They get the credit, they get the money, they also get the failures. That's how it works. Enough about these people. Let's close it out on a bit of a positive. Where is everyone now? You might be wondering, or you might be happy to know, in the very least, that some of EK's people, including many of whom we've spoken with over this series, have found placement at better jobs. After our last episode, we were able to help Jamari, Agent, and Jeremiah get introductions at companies that ultimately hired them. They did all the hard work. They did the interviews, they passed them, they got the jobs. All we did was put their names on a list and send it to some people I know in the industry. So I want a huge shout out to Starforge PCs, Starforge Systems. We have reviewed some of their systems in the past where they actually proactively reached out to me last time and said, do you have a list of the people you're talking to? We'd love to hire them, which was just incredibly heart touching because Starforge is made of people who had this happen to them at Artesian Builds, and they made Starforge, and now they're helping people who are having the same thing happen to them. So that was nice to see. Height also hired some people to work with them. I know a few people at Height, and they were able to get them jobs. So Dave, as an example, was one missed payment away from losing his house. Here's what he had to say about his new job.
I'm now currently at Height. They saved me, and I'm the global PR manager for Height at the moment. And I haven't told Height I'm saying any of this yet, so I best let Height know. And I told Rob, and Rob's just like, dude, just go on record and just tell them, I don't care.
And Joe Roby is now with Der Bauer, who operates his business at a level of integrity that is going to be shocking compared to where Roby's coming from. I respect Der Bauer greatly. Here's what Joe said. I'm looking forward to seeing the first stuff that's got your name stamped on it come out of Thermal Grizzly.
Not sure what it will be yet, but I'm also, super excited for that moment.
Anyway, that's it for this video, this report. Go to store.gamersaccess.net to support us directly. Just to be really real here with you all for a second. So when we do these, I stop all publication for like weeks. In this case, I think this is the only thing I worked on for like 2 weeks. They are very difficult videos to make. They're higher risk because companies like EK could be retaliatory. And just being frank with everybody, every now and then I'll see comments about you do this type of video because it gets clicks. These types of videos, they do get clicks, that is correct. However, the actual cost is astronomical. I think across the 3 EK videos we've done now, especially part 2 where I hired all those consultants and people to help, they are probably approaching $70,000, $80,000 in total sort of cost. And the reason they're so expensive is because that level of research, combing through it, really spending the time on it, and trying to understand the story. And so what that means is we don't publish other things in that window. So I just wanted to share that because I do this because I like doing it. I think it's important. I think it's important to tell a story that often no one has the time to really tell. But we make the time for these things because I enjoy it and it's fun to do, even if sometimes the story is sad. But we get some positive ones through here too. So check those out when they get published. All right. I've had an unhealthy amount of these for the past 2 weeks, so we're going to close it out. Head over to the store if you want to support us. We've got the coaster packs. These shirts are in stock and shipping now. We have them. We ordered these for the last round of EK stuff. They're there. There's not many left, so you can grab one on the store, store.gamersaccess.net, or go to patreon.com/gamersaccess to help us out directly. Thank you for watching. If you're in the industry and you know how to contact me and you need to hire someone, send me a message, and I'll connect you with some of the EK people I know who are still looking for jobs. So thanks for watching. See you all next time.
You've seen the memes, haven't you, Stephen? You were walking through the doors and slaying all these companies. That's it. You are the Tech Grim Reaper now. No longer Tech Jesus, you're Tech Grim Reaper. That's how it is now, man. And you should just put a scythe in the background for your next video. Just buy one and put it in the
Put one
background.
back here.